The champagne cork popped with a sound that echoed through the conference room like a gunshot to my heart. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching my siblings toast to their victory, while my personal belongings sat in a cardboard box at my feet. To better leadership, my brother Marcus raised his glass, his Armani suit catching the afternoon light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Windows I'd insisted on installing when we renovated 5 years ago. To rational decisions, my sister Victoria chimed in, her red-bottomed heels clicking against the marble floor as she moved to clink glasses with Marcus and our youngest brother, Daniel. They hadn't even waited for me to leave the building. Emotional. The word still burned in my throat from the meeting that had ended just 30 minutes ago. After 15 years of pouring my soul into our father's construction company, after growing revenue by 300%, after sacrificing relationships and sleep and sanity for Hartley and Sons, I'd been voted out for being too emotional. The accusation had come during a heated discussion about employee benefits. I'd proposed a comprehensive healthcare package for our workers, the people who actually built the skyscrapers and shopping centers that made us millions. Marcus had called it bleeding heart nonsense. Victoria said I was letting feelings cloud business judgment. Daniel, spineless as always, just nodded along. The vote was swift, 3-1. The only vote in my favor was my own. "Oh, Sophia." Victoria noticed me standing there, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Do you need help carrying that to your car?" I looked down at the box containing 15 years of my life. Family photos from better times, awards I'd won for the company, the coffee mug Dad gave me when I joined fresh out of college that said "World's Best Daughter." My hands tightened on the cardboard edges. "I'm fine," I managed, my voice steady despite the earthquake in my chest. Marcus loosened his tie, already settling into Dad's old chair. My chair for the last 2 years since Dad's stroke. "The transition will be smooth. I've already drafted a press release. We'll say you're pursuing other opportunities." "How thoughtful," I said, turning to leave. Then I paused, looking back at them one more time. "Enjoy the champagne. And the view." Victoria laughed, that tinkling sound she'd perfected at Swiss finishing school. "We will. Don't worry about us, Sophie. We'll manage just fine without your passion projects." I smiled then. A real smile. The kind that would have worried them if they'd been paying attention instead of basking in their perceived victory. "I'm sure you will," I said softly. "For about 60 days. Marcus frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just thinking out loud. You know me, too emotional." I left them there, in their ivory tower, completely oblivious to the foundation crumbling beneath their feet. As the elevator descended, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a contact saved simply as M. Chin attorney. "It's done," I said when she answered. "Send the notices." The truly amusing part was that they'd never bothered to ask why I'd pushed so hard for the building renovation 5 years ago. Why I'd insisted on this particular location. Why I'd handled all the paperwork personally, working late nights with lawyers and city officials. They'd assumed it was just another example of my emotional attachment to aesthetics over practicality. Marcus had even joked about it at the time. Leave it to Sophia to care more about pretty windows than profit margins. But I'd learned something from Dad that my siblings had missed during all those years they spent at business school while I worked alongside him on construction sites. The real power in real estate isn't in running the business. It's in owning the ground it stands on. The elevator dinged at the parking garage. As I loaded my box into my car, my phone buzzed. 3 text messages in rapid succession. Package delivered to Hartley and Sons, attention M. Hartley. Package delivered to Hartley and Sons, attention V. Hartley. Package delivered to Hartley and Sons, attention D. Hartley. 60-day eviction notices. All perfectly legal. All devastatingly immediate. You see, what my siblings never knew, what they never bothered to discover in their rush to push out their overly emotional sister, was that I owned the building. Not Hartley and Sons. Not the family trust. Me. 5 years ago, when the company was struggling and needed to relocate, I'd seen an opportunity. The building was in foreclosure, hemorrhaging money. The owners were desperate. While Marcus and Victoria argued about keeping our old offices to save money, I quietly formed an LLC, Sophia Holdings, and purchased the building with my inheritance from Grandma Rose and a loan I'd secured against my own assets. Then I'd presented it to the family as a lease opportunity through a management company. A 20-year lease with reasonable rates, locked in. My siblings had praised Marcus for finding such a great deal. I'd let them believe it, keeping my ownership buried in layers of legal documentation they'd never bother to examine. For 5 years, I'd collected rent from my own family's company. I'd used that money to pay off the loan, renovate other properties, and build a real estate portfolio that would make their champagne toast look like grape juice at a children's party. But I'd never planned to use it against them. Not until today. Not until they decided that being passionate about employee welfare made me too emotional to lead. My phone rang as I drove home. Marcus. Sophia, what the hell is this? His voice had lost its smugness, replaced by something sharp and panicked. What's what? I asked innocently, navigating through downtown traffic. This eviction notice. There must be some mistake. We have a 20-year lease. Did you read the lease terms, Marcus? Section 15, subsection C. Silence. Of course he hadn't. None of them had. They'd left all the boring paperwork to me. It clearly states that the lease can be terminated with 60 days' notice if the tenant engages in any activity that the landlord deems detrimental to the property's value or reputation. I recited from memory. I'd say voting out a founding family member who increased company value by 300% counts as detrimental, wouldn't you? You don't own this building, he said, but his voice wavered. Sophia Holdings LLC owns the building. Check the public records if you don't believe me. I'm sure Victoria's law degree will come in handy for once. This is corporate sabotage. We'll sue. With what lawyers, Marcus? The ones whose offices are also in my building? The ones who will also need to relocate in 60 days. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, you planned this. No, I said honestly. I planned for security. You three turned it into revenge. I hung up and turned off my phone. Let them stew. Let them scramble. Let them feel what it's like to have the ground shift beneath their feet. By the time I reached my house, a modest bungalow compared to their McMansions, but fully paid for and truly mine, the autumn sun was setting. I poured myself a glass of wine, better than their champagne, and sat on my porch, thinking about Dad. He'd built Hartley and Sons from nothing, laying literal foundations with his own hands. He'd taught me that buildings were more than steel and concrete. They were dreams made tangible. But somewhere along the way, my siblings had forgotten that. They'd reduced everything to numbers on spreadsheets, forgetting the humans behind those numbers. My phone, when I finally turned it back on, showed 47 missed calls. I ignored them all except one, a text from my assistant at my other company, the one my siblings didn't know existed. The Riverside project approval came through. Groundbreaking next month. Riverside was my baby, a mixed-use development that would provide affordable housing alongside retail spaces. The kind of emotional project Marcus would have sneered at. The kind that would actually make a difference in people's lives while still turning a profit. The next morning, I arrived at the building early. Not to clean out my office, that was already done, but to watch. By 8 a.m., the panic was in full swing. Employees huddled in worried clusters. Phones rang incessantly. Through the glass doors, I could see my siblings in the conference room. No champagne in sight now, just coffee cups and legal documents spread across the table. Ms. Hartley? I turned to find James, one of our construction foremen. He looked exhausted, worried. I heard about the vote, he said quietly. The whole crew's talking about it. 15 years you've been fighting for us, and they just... He shook his head. It ain't right. Thank you, James. I touched his arm gently. Can I ask you something? If I were to start a new company, one that actually valued its workers, would you consider joining me? His eyes widened. In a heartbeat, ma'am. I reckon half the crew would too. Good. Give me 2 months. I left him standing there with hope replacing worry on his weathered face. Inside the building, I could see Victoria gesticulating wildly, her phone pressed to her ear. Probably calling Daddy, begging him to fix this mess from his retirement home in Florida. But Dad couldn't fix this. He'd had another stroke 2 weeks ago. Something my siblings didn't know because they'd been too busy plotting my removal to visit him. Only I knew because I was the only one who called him every day, who listened to his slurred words of worry about the company's direction. Don't let them lose sight of what matters, he'd whispered during my last visit. I won't, Dad, I'd promised. One way or another. My phone buzzed. Victoria, we need to talk. Please. I waited an hour before responding. Let them sweat. Then, conference room. 2 p.m. When I walked in at precisely 2 p.m., the champagne flutes were gone. In their place were haggard faces and laptop screens showing commercial real estate listings. 60,000 square feet, Marcus said without preamble. Do you have any idea how impossible it is to find 60,000 square feet of Class A office space in this city on short notice? Extremely difficult, I agreed, settling into a chair. Not Dad's chair. That particular throne had lost its appeal. Almost as difficult as rebuilding a company's reputation after losing the person responsible for its growth. What do you want? Victoria cut to the chase, her perfect makeup unable to hide the stress lines. What I've always wanted. Fair treatment for our employees. Comprehensive benefits. Profit sharing. And recognition that caring about people isn't a weakness. It's what Dad built this company on. That's it. Daniel spoke for the first time, suspicious. No. I also want a public apology. A press release admitting you made a mistake. And I want my position back, not as CEO, but as Chief Strategy Officer. Equal voting rights with each of you. And if we refuse? Marcus asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Then you can enjoy explaining to our clients why their construction company no longer has offices. Why all their contracts are in jeopardy. Why the stability they've relied on for 40 years just evaporated. I stood. Oh, and I'll be hiring away your best workers for my new firm. Starting with the entire Riverside crew. Victoria's mask finally cracked. You vindictive. Emotional, I suggested. Yes, I am. I'm emotionally invested in this company's legacy. In its people. In doing right by the man who built it. That's not a flaw, Victoria. It's what you're missing. Marcus cleared his throat. We need time to discuss. You have 48 hours. After that, I start renovations on this building. I'm thinking luxury condos. The views really are spectacular. I left them there, in their sterile conference room, finally understanding that emotion and business weren't opposites. They were partners, just like family should be. That night, I called Dad. His voice was weak, but clear when I told him everything. Good girl, he wheezed. Sometimes you gotta tear down to build up stronger. I learned from the best, I said, tears finally coming. Not from sadness or anger, but from relief. From vindication. 2 days later, the press release went out. It praised my invaluable contributions and announced my new role. The employee benefits package was approved unanimously. And my siblings learned what I'd known all along. The foundation of any building and any business isn't in the blueprints or the bottom line. It's in the people who pour their hearts into it. And sometimes, the most emotional decision is also the smartest one. Marcus never did sit in Dad's chair again. We donated it to the company museum, along with pictures of Dad laying the first bricks of our first building. A reminder that Hartley & Sons was built on sweat, dreams, and yes, emotion. And the champagne? It stayed corked. We had work to do, foundations to build, and people to take care of. Just like Dad would have wanted. Just like I'd ensured we would, one way or another. The building still stands, housing Hartley & Sons. But now everyone knows who really owns it. And more importantly, they know what I'll do to protect what matters. Some call it emotional. I call it good business.